Go. All right. Well, welcome, Ronan. So, the first thing that we really like to do when we dive into these discussions is just to learn a little bit more about you and how you got to where you are today. So, can you kind of take us through your journey? What started out your path towards helping leaders?
Hey Sam, thanks for having me on the podcast. Boy, it's a pretty long, curvy, windy journey. Started on Wall Street, went into tech and management consulting, and then I started to do more and more entrepreneurial things. I think the real shift was when I started working with my longtime friend and mentor Keith Ferrazzi. You may recognize Keith, author of several books on relationships and networks, one of the eminent team coaches in the world. And he brought me into his organization, Ferrazzi Greenlight, in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, to coach leadership teams. And since then, Keith and I have not only been coaching together, but this past year was a very cool year. We spun off a new company around relationship building and networking.
Well, that's exciting. So, tell me a little bit more about this new spinoff. What is that like?
Yeah, Sam, in our coaching with leadership teams, and this probably doesn't come as a surprise to you or your viewers, the what's more determinant of success is the relationships among the team than the individual aptitude of any one person. That shouldn't come as a surprise. So the
Mhm.
strength of relationships, and those relationships are based, the trust that so many CEOs want, and a lot of our coaching clients come to us and say some form of, boy, the people on my leadership team don't trust one another. There's no silver bullet there. It's built on a relational foundation. So leading with generosity, opening up to vulnerability, creating candor, those same things that work on leadership teams also work in how we develop our individual relationships and our network. So Keith wrote a book about 20 years ago alone. It's probably what he's most famous for. He's written a few great books, but this was his first and probably his most famous. And we sat down at the beginning of the year and we said, with the world of AI and people just coming back on events, um, people really need something that'll help them be more effective at building deep relationships and building a network around them. And a book can only get you so far. So we started a business called Connected Success, and we took that book and other thought leader content, and we created a system out of it. It's an 8-week program that completely online that teaches people to be more effective relationship builders. And we've had about 150 people from 25 different countries go through that program in our first year.
All right. And so you're on your second iteration of that. Is that correct? Or is it your third?
No, we just graduated our second class this
Okay.
past.
And so, how do you go about selecting the professionals? Because there's a very limited space. Is there what is the best candidate for your program?
Well, there's definitely an application process because this is a community we're building. We want to make sure that anyone that makes this investment, not just money, but time, is going to get, the outcomes they want. So you get on the phone with an enrollment advisor, you talk through your specific challenges and goals. The personas that we are attracting are very interesting. So 25 different countries from around the world, so very diverse geographically, very diverse in terms of industries and roles. Interestingly, almost completely split evenly between men and women. But these are people who are generally later half of career. So we're seeing a lot of, mid-level, high potential managers, leaders who know that to get to the next level, they need to be better at executive level relationship building or better in building relationships with partners or clients. We're definitely seeing people from the sales business development role express interest. We're seeing a lot of people who are in a transition, so different role within the company or moving industries or even starting a new venture and know that they want to build their network ahead of when they might need them. Those are the three types of people that we are currently bringing in.
Great. And so let's dive into this program a little bit more. What are the things that they're going to be learning in this program, and why do they matter?
Well, look, why do they matter? Let's start there, Sam. It seems like AI is taking over more and more things that we had previously thought were inherently and always going to be human.
Hmm.
And in a world where that's happening, especially with, look, you and I can, at the press of a button, meet one another. You can meet anyone in the world at the press of a button. That's freaking amazing. In a world with those dynamics, the soft skills around relationships are even more important. I think, one thing I've read is, we're entering sort of a relationship economy.
Hmm.
So it's important to invest in the skills of how to build a relationship consistently with depth, expressing authenticity, empathy, building trust. So that's why this is important. And we can talk about what the outcomes are for an organization as a whole. What does a company with deep, connections and networks look like, and why is it better? What you get out of the program, the outcomes are generally fourfold. One is a system. And this was fundamental to what we designed, right? When we did our research, a lot of what we heard was, Ronen, I don't know what to do, when to do it, who to follow up with and when. I keep losing touch with people, filter failure. I know thousands of people, but who's important? So one is a system of processes and practices and tools. The second is new mindsets and new strategies, mindsets around leading with generosity, mindsets around authenticity. What does that mean? Mindsets around the power of vulnerability and its ability to create emotional contagion and quick connection between people. So shifting mindsets, overcoming limiting beliefs, overcoming common myths about networking. One big one, by the way, is extroverts are great at it, introverts are terrible at it. Complete myth, right? So that's the second outcome, is sort of the mindsets and strategies. The third one is just becoming more comfortable interacting with other humans. So batting practice, right? This is a community that is learning together and practicing these skills together, because a book can only get you so far.
Right.
And so for a lot of people, that batting practice is valuable. And the fourth is just adding incredible human beings to your network. It's been really cool to see what happens over 8 weeks. Yeah, it's online, but you can facilitate real depth of and intimacy online. And then in our graduation, they took the opportunity to meet in person, and seeing those relationships form and where they took them, those in and of itself are valuable as well.
Yeah, I can see how this would be a great program. So let's dive into this a little bit more as far as just relationships in general. And so if we look over the past, 10 years or so, how have how have the relationships evolved, especially in the leadership realm?
Yeah, I mean, so much has changed, right? And leadership, right? There are a lot of different dimensions to it. So, do you mean relation? Are we talking about relationships among the leadership team? Are we talking about the relationship between the leader and their direct reports? Where do we want to take this?
I think
Let's.
let's start with the leadership team itself, because that really is the framework of how well we're going to be with our direct reports. We can go into that second, but let's talk about the leadership among our peers.
Yeah. So I think the big shift, Sam, was with the pandemic and with the shift to remote work, we went from serendipitous interactions and serendipitous structures to engineered structures and interactions. What do I mean by that? Well, the serendipitous water cooler conversation no longer happens. The meeting together at conferences or events no longer happens. The physical contact, right? The high five, the hug, hey, good job, doesn't happen anymore. So, but you still need to generate results. You still need to hit those metrics. And so that presented a significant challenge. And we worked through things like, how many days in the office and things that I don't think are all that important. But what Keith and I worked with our clients on to is what we call high return practices. We have a library of what we call high return practices, things that we've learned that work within our research, from coaching other companies, from Keith's writing. And these are engineered practices for everything from keeping energy levels high to ensuring high candor in the room, making sure people are not withholding information, saying what needs to be said. Really specific stuff. I'll give you an example. And we call it, by the way, we call this concept co-elevation, the leadership team rising together, rather than viewing the CEO or the leader as the center, as the hub. Um, you know, the CEO shouldn't have to be responsible for maintaining the team's energy. The team can do what we call an energy check-in at the beginning of a meeting. On a scale of 1 to 5, put into chat, what's your energy level right now and why? Identify the people that are ones or twos and actually double click on them. Hey, what's going on with you? Do you need some support? Right? The team can do that. The CEO doesn't have to be responsible for that. Bold, inclusive feedback. Our data shows that on an average Zoom, only 4 people out of 10 leave that Zoom reporting that they felt heard.
Hmm.
Only 4 out of 10 people, right? So, you can design breakout room interactions to really increase that psychological safety, bring people back to the main room, have them do readouts so they feel like they've been heard, right? These are engineered interactions, not serendipitous, that we needed to utilize in a world of a virtual work.
So when we're diving into relationship building, I mean, sometimes, I mean, it's so important for the leadership team or the executive team to really be effective in their what they're doing on a day-to-day basis in their discussions and so forth. But it's unavoidable at times that there's going to be some friction. And so, what are the best ways for leaders to really remove some of that friction that has occurred between maybe a couple of members of the team?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We have one of our high return practices we call an open 360. It's
Hmm.
it's it's a very streamlined 360-degree process you can use on a call where you go around and everyone says, hey, Sam, one thing I admire and respect about you is X, and one in service of your success, one thing I might suggest. And so this goes back to the idea of make the team responsible for crossing the finish line together, which includes coaching one another and providing feedback. Um, the other thing is, the CEO or the leader has to spend you have to bring teams together in person. And I don't know what the magic frequency is, but it's not as often as people think, as long as when you are together, you really over-index on the bond building and on the visioning, not on the doing of the work.
Hmm.
So those are two really good tactics that a leader can use to really drive great, stronger relationships.
Great. So let's say we have the leadership team. They're all gelling and everybody's getting along. Now the next phase is really taking this to a leader's direct reports and the people that report to them. And so, what is the next phase that leaders should be thinking about in that context?
Well, look, I think the thing I'd like to talk about, and maybe I'm answering the question or maybe not, hopefully I am, but it's people talk about culture a lot, Sam, right?
Yeah.
Culture. And I think sometimes you hear culture confused with principles or values. So, our culture is about helping people who need help. Well, that's more of a value. That's more of a first principle. To me, the best indication of a company's culture is seeing how they meet, how they spend time together, and how they make decisions. Right. So a lot of people talk about Ray Dalio at Bridgewater, and they look at the corporate culture that Bridgewater created, which has a super high radical transparency, radical candor. Every decision is put on a board. Who made the mistake? Why'd you make the mistake? And what are we going to do about it? Right. In full view. That's the culture of the company, right? It's defined by how they meet and how they make decisions. And so the best thing you can do to cascade the kind of culture you want is to model it at the leadership team level, because the rest of the company, your L1s and below, will see that. Will see that. And so invest in the way that you spend your time and the health and the strength of the relationships on the leadership team. That's where you get the most ROI. Now, it kind of brings us back to this other point that in the connected success world, which is, well, what happens when you have a company where there are strong friendships, relationships, allyships across the organization, across functional lines? Well, in those cases, you have glue that has some incredible benefits for the company, but also means that now it's easier to cascade some of those cultural enhancements
Hmm.
throughout the organization versus an organization that's siloed.
Okay, great. Now, also it's important for relationships not just to exist, of course, inside the organization, but to be effective with your industry peers and influence makers or stakeholders external to the organization. And so, what is the secret sauce here?
Wow, that's a great question. Look, we call this within our co-elevation framework teaming out,
Hmm.
right? Keith has always been a big proponent. Who's your team? Your team's not just your organization. It's some of your key partners. It's some of those, key clients. Bring them into the meetings. Bring them into the product review meeting. That's one element of it. Um, the other element of it is, sure, we understand that we need strong relationships in the market, certainly on the sales and business development side and partnership side, but really everywhere throughout the organization. If your if your lead engineers have strong networks with other engineers at other companies throughout the market, they're going to have access to all the cool new ideas, et cetera. So now we get into the crux of our program, Beyond Connections. And some of the core ideas here are one, and this is one is so simple, but research shows, and it was a piece of research that was published in Harvard Business Review in late 2023, and it tracked 2,000 partners at professional services organizations in and around New York. And what they were trying to research was what makes the rainmakers so successful. And one of the primary thing is they found a persona called activators. And the activators spent several hours a week. It was calendared time cultivating their network. And they protected that time.
Hmm.
And so what did they do with that time? Well, they simply looked at how they can feed that network with generosity, how they can be of service and support, introducing people to one another, inviting them to events, sharing resources, right? And it's amazing. They beat out other personas. So other personas, for example, were experts. They spent their time writing articles to publish in the market and hoping that that would generate new business. Or there was one persona, the debaters. Their whole strategy was, I'm going to be so smart, Sam, and so contrarian that you're going to want to do more business with me. But the activators beat out the other personas by about 35%.
Huh.
So one thing that's really important as a leader is don't take a transactional view to the time that your people are spending investing in relationships. Assuming that they're doing it efficiently with a system, intentionally, that is very valuable. That is very valuable time and shouldn't be just sort of an afterthought, right? Most of us fail at networking. Why? Well, because other things are more important and we just kind of try to jam it in here and there and we think about it. But to be successful in relationship building, you need consistency,
Hmm.
right? You can't be a dot in someone's mental model that just comes in strong and then disappears. You need to be a line, ideally an upward sloping line. So every month or two, you're pinging them with something. Could be a simple, hey, just thinking about you, Sam. That podcast we did was really awesome. Really enjoyed it. But that puts you top of mind, right? That type of consistent follow up, being a line, not a dot, is a great strategy.
And so, what are the ways that a person, you mentioned that, providing them something of value, that's typically the best way to really stay relevant, is understanding what was valuable to them, helping them out.
Yeah, I mean, but then the question then becomes, Sam, how do you lead with generosity? How do you demonstrate value? That's the part that is a little bit more challenging, right? Conceptually, it makes sense. We actually have a crowdsourced list of what we call packets of generosity,
Hmm.
little things, the just thinking about you message, thanking someone, providing feedback on something that they just put out in the market, commenting on a LinkedIn post. These are all small but significant acts of generosity that all fall into the category of adding value, right? Now, there are, in one pocket, you've got your little nuggets. Those are easy to do. I just mentioned a few of them. Then you've got your truffles, right? The truffles, obviously, you want to save for the really important relationships,
Yeah.
the key introductions, the things that take up more of your time. But if you do that consistently and using a system, I promise you that over the course of 6 to 12 months, you're going to find yourself surrounded by 30, 40, 50 ambassadors who are committed to your success, just like you're committed to theirs. And you haven't asked for anything yet. That's the big thing. Getting away from that transactional, what's in it for me model, and just reminding yourself your goal is to get to know this person really well. I mean, take copious notes, family, that they had a surgical procedure, where they went to college, what they aspire to, what they struggle with, what their dreams are. So really understand a person and then have this generosity mindset for at least 3 to 6 months. And you build up that social capital with them such that at some point, if and when you need them, they care enough about you to help you out.
The next thing is, we talked about having maintaining these relationships with our clients and potential prospects that we were interested in doing business with and so forth, and other professionals out there. What about our competitors? Those that
Mm,
we might feel that are adversaries or to our business?
Well, that's a tough question. To be quite honest with you, that gets a little bit out of my domain, and there's probably other people with expertise on competitors. I mean, the one thing you remind me of is back in the day when I started a company called Cross Campus here in LA. We became the biggest boutique shared office co-working business in LA. I remember I was talking to a venture capitalist, and the advice he gave me was take your best ideas, take your best ideas, write them down on a piece of paper or in an email, and send them to your biggest competitor. Because if they can out execute you, you're dead in the water already, right?
Hmm.
It was so I tend to take that approach of execution eats strategy for breakfast, and try to turn competitors into collaborators. There's a great piece of research. I think this was Thomas Jefferson. I got to find it, but essentially he took his it's called the Jeffersonian effect. I think took his one of his biggest political rivals. They really didn't like each other, and he sent him a book that he knew that his rival would enjoy. And what it does is psychologists think that it creates this dynamic where your rival then gets it and says, huh, he's helping me. I must like him or he must like me. And just the act of helping a competitor can sort of breed this virtuous loop and create a positive relationship. So some of these things are counterintuitive. Go ahead and help your competitor and have them wondering, well, why the hell did he do that?
Yeah, exactly. Great advice.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is that I love to ask you about is that there's times where when we're trying to build that relationship and our first approach, maybe we just trip all over ourselves, right? And we don't show our best selves. How do we recover from that and then start over and be more successful?
Wow. None of these are layups, huh? These are the hard ones. Well, let me ask you a question. What do you do in those situations?
Well, I think that
Assuming it was just a minor trip up.
yeah, so of course, I think that the most important thing I think is to be human about it
Right.
and to be real, right? Authentic. It's like, hey,
I done screw up.
it was a bad day for me, It's like and say, it's like I'd love to kind of start over and I really am interested in you and what you do, and I want to, see if we can take this to the next level and see if we can help each other out. So I'd take some approach like that.
That's exactly right. I mean, look, a lot of these things, Sam, they rest on similar conceptual blocks, right?
Mm.
Vulnerability. Hey, I struggled when I met you, and listen, you caught me on a bad day. I had a really, I had a bad fight with my partner, and
Yeah.
you caught me at my worst. So vulnerability, and then fallibility, right? I messed up.
Mm.
I'm sorry, I messed up, and I acknowledge that. Those two things are powerful. I'll share one very small mess in this Zoom world. You ever had a situation where you're on a conversation with someone and you're listening to them over Zoom or in person, actually, in this scattered attention world we live in, and all of a sudden your brain just wanders, and 45 seconds in, you realize you have no idea what they said.
Yeah.
You ever had that happen to you?
Yeah.
So what you do in those situations is just human. Stop and go, hey, I'm sorry, I got to stop you there. My brain just wandered. I completely missed the last 45 seconds. Could you please repeat it for me?
Mm.
And every time I do that, someone kind of chuckles because they appreciate the humanness of it. And like, no problem. Here's what I said. Right. Most of us would kind of like freak out for a moment and say, oh, crap, what did I miss?
Right, right, exactly. Or try to stumble your way through it, which I also think is a mistake. So admitting uh, failures and so forth. I think that that's a sign if people don't understand that others fail at times or maybe are not their best selves at times, then I think that's a fault of that individual person. I mean, we can't be operating at 100% every day, every second. So I think
Right.
that's important.
Right. And look, so much data has pointed to great leadership comes from being comfortable stepping into vulnerability and fallibility. And I'll tell you, one of the interesting things about the program that we've run this year, it's been a fascinating sort of social experiment, bringing all these people from different cultural backgrounds to the table. We've got folks who are training from India and Poland and these countries where culturally they were raised with ideas like, don't be too nice, people will take advantage of you, and
Mm.
don't show weakness because or don't show vulnerability because that'll show that you're weak. And yeah, I can relate to that. I grew up in a Soviet background family, right? Didn't see my dad cry until I was an adult, kind of stern. And so my best advice to them and what we work on is shedding those things because they won't serve them well. But it's challenging, and I'm empathetic to people who either culturally or by family background have been taught, not not to show vulnerability. It's more common than you think. It's more common among men than women, of course,
Mm,
right? But
right.
I think society is changing so fast right now that all those old conventions are falling by the wayside.
So you brought up a really good point about different cultures and so forth, and of course, relationships are built differently in different cultures, and I know that's a deep topic. But when a leader comes into a situation where they recognize, okay, perhaps this individual is from a different culture, maybe they have a different mindset. Is there any types of first steps that are best practices to kind of engage in that situation?
Interesting. Yeah. Look, in my research this year, I went deep into things like power of the smile. There's certain things I thought were global, right? Smiling is pretty close to global. There are certain cultures, interestingly, where if you're smiling, it might make people distrust you, right? In
Mm,
Soviet era Russia, it was like that. Walking slowly, I researched that. Walking slowly says some things about you, but in other cultures, it has conflicting signals. So using things like that. But my advice to a leader and my advice even to people that we're working on relationship building is there's nothing wrong with sort of telegraphing where you're going to go or asking for permission. So for example, if someone, and we call it a Johari window, there's a concept in psychology of a Johari window. Your Johari window is how much of your inner self is exposed to the world. Some
mm,
people close that Johari window. They don't open up. If you've had these conversations where it feels like pulling teeth, and so it's hard to get them to open up. And there's some people who fling their window wide open and wear their life on their sleeve. And within 2 minutes, you're hearing about their bitter divorce.
mm,
Also not great. Also not great. There's an
yeah.
art to this. But there's nothing wrong with asking, hey, is it okay if we get into, I'd like to talk about some personal stuff. How would you feel about that? Right? Asking for what you want to discuss, game planning conversations. I'm a big fan, by the way. Hey, Sam, we have 30 minutes today. I'm really looking forward to this. I'd love to talk about a couple of things, maybe spend a little bit of time on this and this. What are you thinking? What do you want to spend time on? And sort of talk about the talk.
Mm.
That's a very powerful tactic when it comes to trying to create connection, especially when someone is from a different culture where they might have different norms or morals.
Great advice. One other thing is that I think it was Stephen Jobs that said that, hey, I can only have a deep relationship with so many people, and he had a number attached to that.
Yeah.
Is that there's anything true to that science there?
Wow. Let's see. Do you want the 30-second answer, the 1 minute answer, the so I'll start out with something that I find fascinating. So it's not Steve Jobs. I'll have to look into that. But there was a sociologist in the 50s named Robin Dunbar, and you'll often hear people refer to the Dunbar number, and it's 150.
Uh,
And so and I have a slide on this I can share with you. He theorized that like humans can maintain sort of five loved ones, deep relationships or friends. 50 what was it that I don't remember what the 50 bucket was, but 150 was
hmm,
meaningful connections. And this has now taken on a life of its own. You see this in organizational design, you see it in military structures, this idea of like you can only really maintain 150 meaningful connections in your brain. Well, guess where he got that from? The
tell me.
science is completely shady. He was a primate specialist. He was a primate specialist who studied the size of primate social groups, looked at the size of their brains, compared them to the size of human brains, and extrapolated to that 150 number. So there's really no science behind it, but there is some truth to it. And so in the program, we refer to that number as a guidepost, but then I like to sort of apply the 80-20 rule and create a tighter circle of 30 to 50.
Hmm,
So we've got a dashboard and we use the dashboard to track those 30 to 50 relationships. So now why 30 to 50? Well, if we go back to something I said earlier, that the key to building relationships is consistency is being there regularly with touch points. think about the time it takes to maintain that.
Yeah.
If you've got 150 people, and let's say you sit down each week for 2 sessions, and I call them network activation sessions. I've got a Wednesday afternoon and a Thursday afternoon, 45 minutes each in my calendar. And I have batched throughout the week all the cool things I want to do when inspiration strikes. Oh, I'm going to send this to this, and I'll introduce Sam to this person. If you sit down for those two 45-minute sessions, you've got 8 to 10 reach outs per session if you want to be in front of someone every 2 months. That's not easy to do.
Hmm.
Take that to 30 to 50, and it goes down to about 2 reach outs, 2 to 3. So just maintaining that meaningful network, maintaining it with follow-ups is, I think, what drives the ideal number. Now, whenever we go through this, there's always one or two people who kind of raise their hand and go, well, can I push it to 100 or the Dunbar number of 150? And I say, well, start small, time will tell. But here's some factors that influence that. One, do you have an assistant to help you? That's a huge, huge difference. If there's someone who can help support you, push past 50. Two, are you willing to invest more than about 5% of your work week developing your network? 5% of your work week is about 2 to 3. Yeah. If you're at a point in your life or career where your network is so important and you want to develop it, and you're like, I'm going to put 5 to 10 hours a week, sure, bigger network, maintain a bigger dashboard. And the third one is relational memory. There's actually a type of memory that certain people have. My business partner, Keith Ferrazzi, is a freak of nature when it comes to this. He can hold in his brain 500, 600 different people, how he knows them, who they know, what they're doing in their life, where they're struggling. It's not photographic memory. It's not a memory for names. It's relational memory. So if you're blessed with that, you can push past the 50 a little bit.
Amazing.
I
Well,
hope
here's
that answers.
here's so here's my final question for you for today. I know we're running low on time, but there's the also in relationship building, there's the role of the connector,
Yeah.
and bringing people together. How important is that in a relationship?
So we call them super connectors. We've got specific roles that are valuable in any network. Super connectors, cheerleaders, rising stars, mentors. We won't go through all four of them, but in the program, we go through sort of strategies for all four. And if you find someone who plays that role, then they are a valuable person, right? Super connectors, they know a lot of people. They host events. That's very valuable. And by the way, the way you can find out if someone's a super connector, certainly if they're hosting a lot of events, but it's that person in your life who always knows like the great pizza place in New York, or I've got a great graphic designer for you, right? They're always thinking about how to connect people.
Yeah,
And so having some of those around you can be very valuable.
perfect. Well, Ronan, what are the key things that you want our leaders that are listening in today to walk away from this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, look, vulnerability, fallibility. I'm sure every leader or many leaders who are listening to your podcast, they're already, thinking actively about that. Think about intentional time in the calendar for network development, not necessarily for you, maybe for you as a leader, but for certain people within your organization. Um, think about think about what it means to have an organization where people have strong allyships, friendships, relationships across the organization, and how you can foster that, whether it's training them on how to be better relationship builders, whether it's bringing people together for all company or offsites, whether it's creating co-working days regionally where you invite people to get together at a coffee shop or a co-working space to work in person together. The benefits in terms of, I mean, the data is amazing. Your team will be better in times of crisis, quicker path to decision and innovation, lower attrition, higher resilience. So, Keith likes to say, in organizations, networks are more important than org charts. So really think about your organization from a networks standpoint, not a org chart standpoint.
Great. Thank you. Now, I know that there's a lot of our leaders out there that right now are thinking, geez, I want to be part of that next group of 150 of connected success. And so, how could they apply?
Yeah, so we're running Beyond Connections 3, our third cohort. It starts the last week of January. We're going to cap it at 150. We're about halfway there. Just go to our landing page. It's connectedsuccess.com. You'll find a link to it. And it's really easy. Book a call. We've got an amazing enrollment team. They'll have a conversation with you or whoever in your company you think might benefit from this. But the other thing is we've had so much interest now. The outcomes have been so surprising and positive, we have companies coming to us wanting to create a corporate training program out of this. And so a structure, so we're now slightly modifying the experience and the content to support 20, 30, 40 people from an organization to all go through the experience together. And the benefit there is not just that they learn these powerful mindsets and practices, but they practice them together. And the other outcome is, of course, they've developed stronger relationships coming out of it. So if anyone's interested in that, just connect with me. I'm Ronen at connectedsuccess.com, and would love to talk. Now is a great time. We're looking for our first several corporate pilots. So it's a great time. The other thing I'd say, Sam, is Keith just released his latest book. He just published Never Lead Alone, on the heels of, again, 20 years ago, Never Eat Alone. And I would encourage any leader who's interested in this idea of flipping the leadership model so they're not at the center of everything, so that they could be freed up to go up and out, to do the things they want to do, and who are interested in this idea of co-elevation, to read that book, Never Lead Alone. It's a wonderful book.
Hmm, great. Well, thank you so much, Ronan. This has been a great conversation, hugely impactful to me, and I'm sure many of our listeners out there. So I want to thank you personally for joining me on this discussion today.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, you take care, and to all those listeners out there, you take care, and we'll talk to you next week on the People Strategy Forum. All right. Bye, everyone.